What is up, everyone, and welcome to our latest TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzenga TV network. I am your host, Shad Dales. Hope you had a great weekend. Let's get right into it this Monday as we dive in, as usual, this Traded Black podcast, giving you an inside look on cannabis, psychedelics, crypto, and even on the macro level. But we're going to give you a comprehensive look on the capital markets and what was moving today. So let's welcome in our two co-hosts. First, lead financial writer of TDR, Benjamin A. Smith. Good to see you. Hope you had a good weekend.
I did have a good weekend. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. Good for the most part. I had a good weekend, to say the least. Let's welcome in millennial entrepreneur and TDR contributor, I should say, Anthony Verrill. Good to see you. Hope you had a good weekend as well.
Good to see you. I did. I had a great weekend, except for last night with the Dolphins-Eagles game. But aside from that, it was good.
It was a good game, and then it wasn't. 31-17. But those two teams play again. I could see, I think Miami might sound crazy. I think they're a better team than the Eagles.
I mean, it was a lot of officiating faux pas. But the one thing that's for certain is that Eagles D-line is not to be messed with. They stopped the run completely, and they stopped Miami dead in their tracks from doing what they wanted to do.
Yeah,
in the run game.
Okay, gents, let's jump into it. As usual, our first segment called Into the Wire, outlining all the major headlines today in both cannabis and psychedelics. And we begin guns a-blazing with the NRA, as today there was an article published out how Bank of America, MasterCard, and the National Rifle Association, aka the NRA, are now lobbying the Marijuana Act. And this grabbed a lot of attention in the space, Anthony. So, are there any implications or challenges with the NRA's involvement in this, given their stance on gun control and the legalization of cannabis? It's interesting.
I think it's very interesting. I don't want to rain on everyone's parade before we get started, but just to preface this, yes, they are lobbying towards the SAFER bill. However, no one knows if it's for or against. They are just actively lobbying as it relates to the bill. But such as what happens in the state of Florida, the fact that I'm a medical marijuana patient, I cannot go purchase a firearm right now. You can't own a firearm and you can own a firearm, but you can't buy a firearm and have a medical marijuana card in tandem. They won't let you.
Really? I did not know that.
So in the NRA's standpoint, that is obviously unconstitutional, as it should be your free and inalienable right to own a firearm. So the NRA, I'd have to assume, are on the right side of this from a lobbying perspective. Bank of America and the other financial institution that was mentioned, I would have to err on the side of they are on our side from a lobbying perspective as well.
Yeah.
As Section 10, it did have language that was that had, in regards to the AML laws and the relaxing of that, had implications with firearms, alcohol, big tobacco, and I think oil and gas. And Bank of America, they want a piece of the cannabis pie. I do believe that they are all on the right side of this lobbying effort. However, just wanted to be the cautious optimist that I am. The disclosures that were found does not say which way they are lobbying as it relates to SAFER.
Ben, you agree with that?
I think the fact that you cannot buy a firearm if you own a medical card in Florida, I mean, obviously that's unconstitutional. I'm not an attorney. It would seem that way, but it bugs me from the perspective that cannabis is still looked at as something that's going to make you irrational, that's going to drive you crazy. I mean, obviously they're connecting the two so that you can't purchase one because of the stigma that consuming cannabis has. So something's got to change with that, because can you buy a firearm if you drink a beer? I mean, it's should be the same dynamic.
I mean, I think it was just horse trading as it relates to actually getting the medical marijuana infrastructure passed in Florida. They probably had to horse trade a couple of points.
Yeah.
And dually owning a gun and a medical marijuana card somewhere along the line was probably like, well, it's not really that big of a deal, and it's a winning point on the other side, so let's just give it to them.
Yeah, but think about the intonations to that, Anthony. Think about.
I'm completely against it.
I'm not saying you're saying this, but I'm just saying you're effectively saying that the regulatory stature is effectively saying that that owning a medical cannabis card could make you more likely to do something wrong with your firearm or something like that. And it's got a stigma attached to it by de facto. And how many medical cannabis cards are owned in Florida? Probably like close to what? a few hundred thousand, a million?
Yeah. So the thing that I thought was strange, and I don't really want to get too into this because it's obviously just regulatory focused. But I own firearms. I own assault rifles, and I was able to get my medical marijuana card.
Interesting.
But if I'm in possession of my medical marijuana card as it stands today, I can't go to a store and purchase a new firearm. So tell me how that makes sense.
That
Because
makes zero sense.
I'm in the state registry as being a firearm owner, and they still let me get my marijuana card.
So Bank of America and MasterCard, you've heard these names before in the past. What's this say about the NRA now? Potentially, you're saying could be one way or the other, but if they are in favor, big name to be backing up this industry, don't you think?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I put this on Twitter this morning. I mean, the NRA is the GOP's daddy. The NRA owns the GOP.
That's
you want to talk about probably the most powerful lobbying entity in this country. The NRA is up there in the top 3 or 5.
That's interesting. Good point.
The NRA wants something done. The GOP and the good old boys up in Washington, they get it done.
They get it done. What that happens.
They get it. They get it done.
Hence the reason why, Ben, this feels different, right?
I think so. I mean, what excites me more is even Bank of America's on board, because I think about the financial reach that they have, assets under management, MasterCard. I mean, they're looking at this from how do we profit from this? And if you have those big, huge tier 1 institutional backing for this bill, I mean, it's going to be hard to shut that out. So
I mean, these are heavyweights.
These are heavyweights. I mean, MasterCard is what's their market cap? Like $50 billion company, something like that.
Somewhere around there. But I mean, these are just heavyweights in Washington. Like, they want something done, they get it done. It is what it is. Yeah.
Same in Pennsylvania, right? CF, as what you're stating in Florida. That's interesting. Yep. Doesn't make sense, but one day it will. Speaking of heavyweights, let's now shift to the psychedelic industry, where industry heavyweight Cybin announced today that's closing of the small pharma acquisition, which will create, according to Cybin, an international clinical stage leader in novel psychedelic therapeutics. Anthony, when you combine these two companies' portfolios, this is a big-time player now. What stands out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was what made Steve Cohen in Point72 actually invest in Cybin. Cybin's now truly investable. They have a moat. They have defense around their DMT portfolio. They have 30 patents granted and 160 pending as it relates to DMT. Yeah. And this creates IP. They've got data coming out later this year, I think in the phase 2 trials. And this really gives them that moat and deems them as an investable entity from a biotech perspective.
Yeah. 2 most important letters in psychedelics, IP, that's for sure. But yeah, let's now switch to political news out of Washington. And then go ahead.
Phase 1 data will be out later this year on 004, anticipated later in the year.
But you're also right. They have the phase 2 for CYB003 for psilocybin. So they actually have 2 readouts coming. Yeah. DMT is phase 1 and the phase 2 before the year's out.
Yeah. Big acquisition, though. Big acquisition. Yeah. Okay, let's jump into political news out of Washington. And then there was 9, where the cannabis industry got welcome news, I think, last week, with Jim Jordan being the latest to drop out of the House Speaker race. There are now 9 candidates remaining, with 6 of the 9 having voted already for SAFE, Ben. So who are some of the notable names that cannabis investors should be watching?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest names right now are Tom Emmers. He's the number 3 House Republican who is the majority whip. And he's one of the main front runners. And we hear his name mentioned a lot, of course, because he's a senior ranking member of the House and on the Republican side. And he would be good for cannabis. He's voted for SAFE, I believe, a couple times. And he's a little bit more liberal when it comes to the issues, as opposed to Scalise and Jordan, who are completely against all cannabis issues, voted against it. Only Scalise voted for the Marijuana Research Act. So not having those 2 as the front runners, and that's the main takeaway, is a good thing for cannabis, the possibility of cannabis reform going forward, either as a standalone or it could be included as an amendment. You don't need the House voting for that. But either way, with Scalise and Jordan gone, any one of these, 6 of the 9 candidates, if they get in, it's going to be good for reform.
6 out of 9. Give me one of the 6, right, Anthony?
Yeah, this was great. Don Murphy, who's a friend of the program, he actually made a dance card this morning and posted it out on Twitter of basically the 9 candidates for the House, how they line up on cannabis, and I mean, like 6 out of 9 of them would be a pretty good dancing partner.
Okay, Don, if
Yeah.
Don's watching this, we're getting him on this week. We got to have him on to talk about this. That would be great
Yeah.
to kind of outline some of the names and who they are and what they mean. Let us know. You think that's a great idea? Who are some of the names that you're watching? Who are some of the names that you want to learn more of? Let us know in the comments below. You're watching the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga TV network. Let's continue on with Into the Wire, their latest, I should say, listen, actually interesting headline on the macro level. Last Friday in our podcast, we outlined how 10-year Treasury bond yields are at their highest level since 2008's financial crisis. And needless to say, this is, I think, has, needless to say, a lot of investors' attention globally, including Bill Ackman, a prominent hedge fund manager from Pershing Square Capital Management, who pushed out a tweet this morning, Ben, that grabbed a lot of attention. What was in this tweet?
Basically, he said that his firm had covered its bond shorts, and there is an inverse relationship between the price of bonds and rates. So as rates rise, the price of bonds falls. So he covered his short, and he's buying those back, and that's in anticipation of rates perhaps peaking, and that's exactly what happened. I think this morning the 10-year benchmark treasuries were trading above 5%. And after that news came out, I think everybody piled on, and it screamed lower. So after a big rally in treasury yields, it fell to below 4.9%, like all the way to like 4.87%. So I think his covering of bonds was like a signal to the market that maybe they should be covering their bonds too. Getting out of their short on bonds, and treasury yields fell, and it was briefly positive for the market, but then the market kind of fell back later in the day. But it was a very powerful tweak, a lot of traction.
Ben, I know you've got some macro experience. I mean, you want to kind of just give a brief synopsis on really what the binary relationship is with stocks and bond yields?
Yeah, a lot of people get that confused. Like, as I mentioned, there's an inverse relationship between bond yields and rates, and most of this has to do with the present value of bonds as determined by the expected future cash flows that they present. So, as when yields rise, the discount rate increases, which causes the present of future cash flows to decrease, lowering the value of the bond. So it's and there's a few other reasons beyond that too, yield to maturity and things like that, but basically, the important thing to know is bond prices will fall as rates rise, and there's a direct causation and correlation between the two. So as the yield falls, then bond levels rise, and that's what Ackman covered. He covered his bond short.
So if he's covering his bond short, forward-thinking statements, what are the big concerns that investors should take away from this?
I think the biggest thing is that he expects that there's a short-term top in yield, and this is important for all equity investors, which is why we brought it up, is because with 10-year treasuries above 5%, you can basically get a risk-free rate of 5% on government bonds by not doing anything. So the higher yields go, the less attractive it is to purchase equity, and the more bearish it is for the equity market, because it pulls money away from that as more people invest in more of the risk-free rate of bonds. If he expects bonds to go lower, then equities become more attractive, and it's the rate. Treasuries had a huge run lately along the curve, and hopefully this signals a short-term top, because that plays into things like interest rates and variable rate mortgages and all the things that go into making consumer financing more expensive.
AKA a recession, correct?
In theory, yeah.
Which
the economy is not showing any signs of it, which is the crazy part.
Yeah. Got an interesting comment. We're going to touch on this a little bit later. In your opinion, the rhetoric being thrown around about Verano uplisting on SIBO, indicating more stabilized stocks, but Columbia Care has been on SIBO for a while. Volatile as can be, 20% swings. Interesting topic or question to be asked, but my personal thought is just there's so much. Columbia Care, aka the cannabis company holdings, they went public on 2019 on the NEO?
2019, they went public on the NEO.
Yeah. So I just think we're at a time and a place now where anybody uplisting on an exchange like this that has definitely been acquired by SIBO out of the US, there's reasons why they're pivoting during these times based off of HHS news. But that doesn't necessarily take anything away from the cannabis company at all, I think, in my opinion. It's just old
Yeah, I mean,
news.
I don't think it's a function of volatility. I mean, I don't think Verano or the cannabis prefer to be on SIBO to limit volatility in their stock.
Yeah.
It's more so that the custody is clearer and it's more accepted at institutional investors. There's more visibility. SIBO's in global markets. SIBO's also a senior exchange.
Yeah.
It's a massive upgrade from the CSE, amongst many other things. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd like to see less volatility. I'd more so be focused on the spread that the stocks are trading. Looking at stocks that are listed on SIBO versus the OTC or versus the CSE, they have a tighter spread that's built in on the bid ask, which benefits you, the investor, as well when you're trading.
Yeah, agreed.
And also, Aaron Miles noted that one of the reasons why they made this move too was to perhaps limit the ability of naked shorting. So SIBO has a better apparatus and market structure in the way the exchange is structured that disincentivizes or makes it harder for naked shorting to happen as it would on the more junior exchanges. So that could be a potential benefit. We don't know yet, but I mean, that could be a potential expected benefit. And that's a big topic of conversation in the industry, of course, naked shorting. That goes all the way back to the pre-legalization days in Canada where, funds like Anson funds were purportedly doing this. So hopefully it has an effect on that as well.
Hey, and look, if you want to know more about that, we actually spoke to Nicholas Vita, posted actually this morning on the Dales Report YouTube channel. The Cannabis Show is here, is it's titled. So we got an in-depth interview with him. And then we've got a cool little mini documentary film of last week's event of Verano listing on SIBO. That's going live on our YouTube channel tomorrow morning. Okay, last announcement, some interesting news from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals about how psilocybin potentially could be rescheduled from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 drug on the list of controlled substance. Ben, what are factors you think are driving the debate around the potential reclassification?
It's all about therapeutic potential, right? As these studies come out, big and small, from the pubcos, from the private research houses, I mean, it all shows that that psilocybin, DMT, various psychedelics are efficacious in the treatment of mental health conditions. So I think as the growing body of evidence sort of amasses, there's a critical mass that is sort of happening where some of these legislatures are getting ahead of things. We've seen California do it recently with Governor Newsom a couple weeks ago, or the California legislature basically ready for psilocybin assisted therapy when that becomes when those rescheduling events occur. So it's happening here as well in another state. It's good to see, and I think it just states, courts, legislatures getting out in front of this so that when it does get rescheduled, as we see with cannabis and the potential thereof in 2024, that they're ready to provide this service to consumers.
Bingo. Show me the data, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get some data here soon, like Ben alluded to with the phase 2 of 003 from Cybin. You've got the other big boys waiting on this, but I mean, it was a good headline. I mean, I thought it was an interesting article, but it's kind of like a nothing burger because the medical efficacy and the therapeutic uses, there's plenty of work and there's plenty of money right now that's being poured into that.
Important to share, though, if it goes Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, it's just increasing the storyline of the MDMA possibly being legalized next year, too. Like, all this stuff is starting to get some notice and some attention.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that we need to probably draw a pretty stark line between the rescheduling of cannabis and the rescheduling of these kind of substances.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any parallels to be drawn between them. I mean, I do think that these drugs should be controlled substances.
Yeah.
They should not be decrimmed to a degree. They shouldn't be loosely rescheduled. I mean, these are heavy drugs that in certain instances can very greatly so alter your mind.
Agreed.
Unlike cannabis.
And that's why the data is extremely important on what
unlike cannabis, which is lacking medical research,
Bingo.
Psilocybin right now has medical research across the board.
Correct.
That's actively coming.
But what's in that data will help understand the legislation about what they want to outline a little bit better, to your point, which I get, because you can't use this loosely. That's for sure. All right.
Yeah, because I mean, we're all advocates, but everything we know right now is pretty much anecdotal.
Yeah. That concludes our first segment, Into the Wire, highlighting basically the biggest headlines in both the cannabis, psychedelics, crypto space. Let's now switch to segment 2, which is now our daily movers of the day. We begin once again with cannabis and multi-state operator MariMed. Ben, saw a big drop today. Why?
I don't think there's any reason for the news, really. But of note, it has become one of the first U.S. cannabis operators to actually retrace the entire move from August 30th, the August 30th close when the HHS recommendation first came out. So most of the MSOs have gotten there during the current drawdown of the recent run. MariMed is, I guess, there already. But I don't think there's any particular reason or news for this. It just, it's just been a weak market and is sort of a tier 2. It's just been drawing down like all of this.
Strong company, Anthony.
Strong
right?
company though. Yeah.
I mean, I don't get it. I mean, MariMed was up 4% and change last week. They've got a 10% move today. Like Ben said, they literally round tripped that trade. I think you should be looking at MariMed. I think MariMed should be on your watch list. Going into earnings, they've got operations in Ohio, they've got operations in Maryland, and they're in markets right now that are turned on and that are strong. I don't understand what the move is here. It was on volume too, on like 760,000 shares. But I'm going to be watching MariMed here very closely for the next couple of weeks, especially going into that earnings print.
Yeah,
agree with those sentiments. Strong company.
Full disclosure, MariMed is a client of the Dales Reports. Next up, equity leader in cannabis ETF, MSOs, Ben.
Yeah, MSOs coming in today. My biggest watch was whether it could kind of hold this 665 area, which is an area of short-term support that had been trying to make over the past several days. It had kind of bounced off that level a few times. It briefly retraced below that before finishing above on Friday. So, MSOs has just been drawing down. It's been trying to find this bottom. So I've been looking to see whether a short-term bottom could be formed. So we have a base to perhaps rally if there's a good, speaker candidate that, gets through and gets the gavel. But it wasn't meant to be. It kind of, hit that level. It kind of stayed at that level for a while. And then as the market kind of sold off later in the day, despite, treasury yields dropping, it fell as well. So I don't know what to say. All you can say right now is look at the price action. Is a short-term volume is still looking for that, and it hasn't been reached. And stay tuned.
Yeah, someone asked me today on Twitter. I got to laugh. They're like, "So when do you think it's going back to 15?" I was like, "Your guess is as good as mine." I sure as hell hope so within the next 12 to 18 months. But we'll see.
I think everything that we were saying a couple of weeks ago is starting to take shape. You can't really understand where this is going in the short term, but we kind of predicted this, where things are trading sideways for the foreseeable future until the next catalyst announcement, which, we've kind of indicated in last week's podcast. There's 2 big votes in Ohio and Florida coming up next month. Don't know how much of an impact that'll have on the industry, but we all know this HHS DEA kind of feedback. Not an answer, but they could be back within a 90-day window. That should be some interesting feedback for the industry again. But until then, I just think it's going to remain volatile. All right. You're listening to the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. This is our second segment, Daily Movers. Third stock on our Daily Movers, Anthony, is Cybin. Trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol CYBN. Why was this a mover today?
Yeah, I mean, it's on the day. It's about flat. But I mean, I'm looking to watch it here in the next couple of weeks. Like we had alluded to, I mean, they've got phase 1 data. They've got phase 2 data, both with DMT and their psilocybin therapies, respectively. I think it's got a lot of tailwind risk, which is good. I mean, it's a stock that I'm definitely going to watch here. It's trading at about 48 cents now, up from that level around 35 when the 0.72 investment came in. And I mean, I think it'll trade aggressively on headlines. So I'm definitely going to watch it. And I like that they got this acquisition closed. Now Doug got what he needed to get done. Yeah. Now it's time for execution.
Yeah. Well, you said it best. This stock does perform well on headlines, does it not? You look at that chart. Yes, we've seen a little bit of a downtrend, but this industry is
biotech will get traded
now.
Yeah, biotech will get traded. This is a long-term This is a long-term gig. And I mean, we're talking 2027 for most of these companies to actually get to market.
However,
So I mean, watching it around those. Yeah.
Promising data in December could be compelling for this company as well.
On the phase 2 front.
Perspective too is important here because with Cybin closed today at 64 cents, its low is around 30 cents. So it's double where at its lows, where the rest of the sector like Compass Pathways train at new lows, Atai is trading right at its lows, Newman is trading right at the lows. So it's on a relative basis, it's performed a lot better than its peers. I don't know if it's going to move too much on the data. Historically, companies in the psychedelic space haven't moved that well on data, or haven't kept the move at least.
Yeah,
but we'll see. I think, relatively speaking, it's definitely performing better than the rest.
Yeah. Now for our fourth and final stock, John Verville, he actually writes, all Canadian cannabis has all been erased as of today since HHS, which segues into our last daily mover, which was Aurora Cannabis, that is now reached all-time lows this morning. Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, Aurora, it's Aurora.
It's Aurora.
Yeah, I mean, there's no U.S. exposure. There's nothing really to like, except for that they've been slashing debt for the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, Ben, you've been watching this closely. Any feedback on all-time lows for this company?
Not much. I'm kind of looking at this more for the psychological reason. Like, could there be potential for a short-term entry because it had retraced everything, and there was a fairly decent base right at where it was sitting at the lows, but no, it went right through. So I mean that there's just nothing here. It keeps dropping. And like Anthony said, I think they've alleviated some debt. They purportedly are going to go cash flow in 2024, but we kind of heard that story in 2018, 2019 when they're kind of saying the same thing when Cam Batley was there. So I wouldn't put too much stock into it. But it's retraced the whole lows, and Canopy's almost there. It's Canopy's 5 to 6 cents above, so it's been holding up a little bit better. But unless you like catching falling knives, I would kind of stay away right now.
Yeah. A reminder, all views of the Traded Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice, and the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Okay, that concludes our second segment, our Daily Movers. Now let's head into our final segment, what we're watching. TDR, Traded Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. So let's jump into it. Ben, who are you watching and why?
Yeah, I'm watching, getting back to treasury yields. I'm watching that because I want to see if the 10-year treasury note can stay below 5%. Because if it can, I think this could be a potential tailwind for the market. It would signal that interest rates are along the curve are probably not going to rise too much more than they are now. And of course, that has been absolutely hammering the consumer. Mortgage rates are on variable basis are up over 8% on the 30-year in the United States, and in Canada they're super high as well. So I want to see stability. I want to see a top in rates, and these treasuries yields kind of edging lower over the long term. And if we do, I think this could provide a tailwind for the market.
Anthony, over to crypto.
Yeah, I hate to pound the table, but I'm watching Bitcoin. Bitcoin's 31.7 right now. It's looking like it might crack 32 by the end of the day. There's not a lot of resistance from here up until I think 42. It could move. It's one headline away from really breaking out. I'm watching that, and I'm watching Link. Link was up around 50% since Friday. This morning, those God candles are, there's people and there was a lot of increased action on chain. As it relates to Link, I think there was about 100,000 plus trades this weekend as far as the on-chain analytics go. So I'm going to be watching Link moving here shortly. If Bitcoin starts to take a ride, I think it's going to take Ethereum with it, and then you'll see an altcoin rally probably form.
Is Link an altcoin, or is Link?
Link is an altcoin. Chainlink is an altcoin. It's also I guess important to note that it's not an L2 or a layer 2 or for Ethereum. Chainlink is its own ecosystem, and it's really how they get a lot of the data from the real world into the blockchain ecosystem via their Chainlink oracles. It's a very interesting company, and it's been a token that's I've been in and out of for some time now.
Mitch, you want to bring up those healthy green God candles again? Wow, that was impressive run. to say the least. But you had said one announcement away from really going for, I guess, a good rip. There's nothing holding us from 42,000. What do you think that announcement is, or
It's going to be the Bitcoin. It's going to be the Bitcoin ETFs.
Yeah.
A judge today actually said that they need to revisit the GBTC conversion is being considered. BlackRock amended their application. Like, if there's a Bitcoin ETF announcement, it's gonna rip.
When do you see that happening? If you were to, could it be days? Could it be weeks? Could it be months? You just don't know.
Weeks. Huh? I mean, I think it could be tomorrow. It could be 30 days from now.
All right.
I don't really get into timing when we're talking about the SEC.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, gents, that concludes basically our show today and our last segment, which was our what we're watching and why here in the TDR Traded Black podcast here on the Zega Television Network. So just a quick recap. Bank of America, MasterCard, and the NRA are now jumping on the cannabis bandwagon as all three companies have announced they're lobbying for the Marijuana Act. Cybin announced the official closing of their small pharma acquisition. We're now down to 9 candidates for the House Speaker, with 6 of them having already voted for safe banking. Psilocybin could be rescheduled from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2, and keeping our eyes once again on the 10-year Treasury bonds. And good old Aurora Cannabis hitting all-time lows.
OGI hit the lows as well.
Did it really?
So, I mean, LPs, no reprieve on LPs.
Well, what do you think? Where is Aurora Cannabis going? Do you still follow it closely? What's your thoughts on this cannabis space? Yes, we're seeing complete retrace from the rally in September, but this does feel different based off of HHS News. You still optimistic about the industry? Let us know. Leave some comments below. And to Anthony's point, do you think Bitcoin is going to rip? If so, why? Let us know. Love to hear your feedback. Gents, appreciate the time. Check back in with you on Wednesday. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day.
See you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because we would not be here without you.